Well, hello, and welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. Now, this week's blog is entitled Fear and Loathing at a Bar. And it's not a bar in the traditional sense, it's actually the bar exam, or more specifically, the bar that we as attorneys are members of. And it's a direct result of a conversation that I had with the lieutenant colonel. So, as most of you probably already know, in order to practice law in any jurisdiction in the United States, you need to be admitted to a bar. It's typically a state bar. And in order to get admitted, you either have to sit for a bar exam, which is, depending upon which jurisdiction, 2 to 3 days, or alternatively, if you are already a member of a bar and you've been practicing for at least 5 years and are in good standing, there is a methodology to be able to motion into that bar. Effectively, you're waived of the requirement to go through the bar exam. Now, Washington State, not to be confused with the District of Columbia, where I actually happen to be admitted. There is a movement afoot to eliminate the bar exam. Effectively, if you want to become a lawyer, you just would essentially say you're a lawyer. Cosmo, the lieutenant colonel, is deeply antagonistic towards this idea. I'm actually a little bit more willing to allow it to happen. And one of the reasons that I kind of feel this way, first and foremost, is I'm, a radical libertarian, and I don't like the idea of any sort of government intervention preventing people from engaging in commerce. That's just philosophically where I come from. But also one of the reasons why I'm not particularly upset about this is that for the vast majority of human history, those of us that have engaged in the practice of law had no bar to be a part of. It's a relatively recent phenomenon. Anybody who's ever watched a movie where people are in law school, the paper chase or anything like that, that's only been around since the 1870s. But prior to that, if you went to law school at all, it was really more of a gentleman's club, and there was no requirement that you actually attend, and there certainly weren't any tests or anything like that. Extremely famous jurists, especially in American history, Abraham Lincoln and John Adams and even Oliver Wendell Holmes, they never went to law school or, for that matter, took a bar exam. They just announced they were lawyers. And in today's modern society, where we have all of these, apps that you can use to determine whether or not some commercial activity is good, you can rate businesses and things like that. I think there are, in fact, enough consumer protections that would allow the general public to determine whether or not someone should be the beneficiary of your money if you're looking to hire an attorney. On top of that, there's a group of individuals, relatively recent phenomenon, called paralegals, that are effectively subject matter experts. They're not licensed to practice law, but in all candor, they probably know the law better than a lot of practicing attorneys, at least as it relates to their very specific subject matter. And they typically will assist lawyers, think almost like doctors and nurses. So that's one of my underlying arguments. But in writing the blog, I started getting a little bit more expansive. And I started challenging the whole idea of higher education in and of itself. I'm not going to go into all that in the video, but I will end with this. So, in my opinion, especially after World War II, degrees, the physical documents that you're awarded at the end of going through an actual education program, whether it's a undergraduate degree or, for that matter, even a graduate degree, I think are becoming less and less, they mean less and less. That's probably a best way of describing it. Yeah, it certainly suggests that you've gone through a formalized course of study, although where does that accreditation even come from? And what does it actually say about the individual that's gone through that program to begin with? Okay, today we have access to a tremendous amount of free education, as I say in the blog. To anyone, the entire library of Alexandria is available at your fingertips. From YouTube videos to websites, there's just a tremendous... All of human history is basically encapsulated and available for your review. So why then do we need to go through a formal study that is incredibly expensive in a lot of respects, when you might actually be able to receive a better course of study that's been tailored directly to you? So these degrees, I think, are becoming less and less meaningful. To that end, we have developed the Artemis Defense Institute Center for Advanced Strategic and Defensive Studies. That seems incredibly impactful, doesn't it? And to give ourselves a certain degree of credibility, the Lieutenant Colonel and I have decided that we are going to be senior fellows at the Artemis Defense Institute Center for Advanced Strategic and Defensive Studies. Now, while we both have JDs, that may not necessarily be as decorative as required to be senior fellows. So we have decided to award ourselves PhDs. So from this point going forward, we now expect to be referred to as Dr. Lieberman and Dr. Taramina. If you're interested, perhaps, in becoming a doctor yourself, go ahead and hit me up. I'm sure we can probably get you some sort of certificate. Anyways, do hope you read the blog. As always, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.